Welcome to our PG&E hydropower facility. System-wide, PG&E operates some 67 hydroelectric generating stations or powerhouses that are part of our vital overall generating capacity and meet much of our customers' energy needs. Safely performing work to both maintain and upgrade these facilities is critical to their safe, reliable, and efficient operation within the governing state and federal regulations. You are watching this video because PG&E has an absolute commitment to your safety and the safety of everyone working here. Whether you are an employee, a contractor, or anyone visiting one of our hydro powerhouses, dams, reservoirs, or water conveyance systems. It is because we value safety above all else that we insist that you comply with all rules and procedures and that you are accountable for all of your behaviors and actions. No exceptions. If you are found to be in violation of any rule or procedure at any time, you will be asked to leave once and will not be allowed to return. We never take safety for granted, and neither should you.
First, before you start work or enter a generation facility, you must have appropriate safety attire or personal protective equipment, also referred to as PPE. At all times, contract employees are expected to provide and wear a minimum level of PPE when they perform work. Of course, additional levels of PPE will be required when the minimum level of protection is inadequate to protect employees from specific hazards that may be identified. These hazards can be identified during a site visit or pre-construction meeting and can be found in the Job Safety Analysis, or JSA, that we will discuss in just a moment. A non-conductive hard hat, safety glasses that meet ANSI Z87.1 1989 standard, long-sleeve shirts and pants made of natural fibers, a reflective Level 2 flame-resistant traffic vest when working at job sites with vehicular traffic, and protective slip-resistant work boots that cover the ankles are required at a minimum. Employees requiring prescriptive or corrective lenses must use ANSI Z87.1 1989 standard or must wear safety glass overlays over their prescription eyewear that meet ANSI Z87.1 1989 standard. Additional PPE may also include, but is not limited to, hearing protection, rubber gloves when handling chemicals, or other appropriate gloves when working with sharp objects, pneumatic chisels, jackhammers, or performing hot work, for example. Additional eye protection will also be required, including a full face shield when performing any hot work. Hot work is identified as any activity where a spark or flame is present, such as with welding or grinding. Additional PPE required when working around equipment with the potential to become energized or when entering an energized facility like a powerhouse or switchyard include Level 2 flame-resistant clothing and leather non-slip work boots with rubber soles. Any undergarments worn under flame-resistant clothing should be made of natural fibers. Timely and detailed work planning is essential in helping all employees perform their jobs safely and accurately. A job safety analysis, or JSA, is the first step to making sure that happens, regardless of how routine, normal, or customary a job may seem. In fact, no job can begin without a detailed JSA worksheet. A JSA must include 1. A list of the work tasks involved in completing the job or work assignment. This may also include things like pre-trip inspections and travel to and from the project site. 2. A list of potential hazards that may occur when preparing to perform or performing those tasks. 3. A list of the controls needed to minimize or eliminate those potential hazards, such as special tools, engineering controls, administrative procedures, special tasks, or specific PPE, just to name a few. 4. The participation of all project-assigned employees, so that a broader perspective and identification of any hazards are understood. The JSA should be thoroughly reviewed prior to starting work, but also following the daily lunch break and at the start of each day should the job last 2 or more days. Should the work conditions or scope of the work change while work is in progress, it is important that all work stop and the JSA be reviewed to ensure all hazard reduction steps are still applicable. If not, all affected employees should be assembled to make any necessary changes to the JSA. Tailboard meeting definitions. Before starting any work, it is important to know exactly what work you are to perform, what the conditions will be, and how to minimize any potential hazards you may encounter. To do this, a tailboard meeting must be held first. This will promote effective communication and teamwork between all crew members and will give you a clear understanding of what is expected. The key elements for a successful tailboard include 1. Extensive review of the JSA, the overall work objectives that are to be accomplished during the total duration of the job, and the role and task of each crew member. 2. Review the previous day's work in order to encourage sharing of any safety concerns or hazards that may have been encountered. An action list then should be created that identifies the steps necessary to mitigate exposure to these hazards or to eliminate them completely. 3. If any site conditions or scope of work change before, after, or during the workday, an additional tailboard must be held to address those changes. 4. Everyone should be encouraged to participate fully in each tailboard. The tailboard should be delivered in a logical, clear, and concise manner so everyone understands and is in agreement as to their work assignment. Should any concerns or questions arise, those items should be addressed with care and handled prior to any start of work. 5. Finally, everyone should be reminded that while working, they should look for and address hazards immediately. Of course, if a serious hazard is observed while a job is in progress and where an injury may occur or important equipment may be damaged, any employee is empowered to stop work immediately and inform their supervisor and the PG&E escort. PG&E escort. Throughout the duration of your contracted work at our facilities, you'll be assigned a PG&E escort, also known as a watershed sponsor, PG&E site representative, or inspector. The PG&E escort is made available to allow access to the project site and to ensure the safety, quality, and progress of the work being performed. A list of names of contract workers, emergency phone numbers, and vehicle license plate numbers shall be given to the PG&E escort at the beginning of work and must be updated as necessary. Fit for duty. We expect you to be as committed to safety as we are. Therefore, you are expected to be fit for duty, and your conduct is safe and professional at all times. Our rules of conduct and policy dictate that no contract employee may enter any PG&E owned or leased property possessing, furnishing, selling, offering, using, or being under the influence of alcohol, illegal drugs, or other controlled substances as defined under federal or California law. All contractors must give assurances to PG&E that their employees and subcontractors are drug-free. Any employees taking over-the-counter or prescribed drugs need to know the potential effects that they may have on their workability. Your supervisors must be informed of any usage of over-the-counter or prescription medications, so they may assign work appropriate to your condition. Where reasonable cause exists that this policy has been violated, contractors must inform PG&E to the fullest extent permitted under governing collective bargaining agreements and/or applicable security and human resource policies. All contractors or subcontractors working for PG&E may be asked to submit to a search, which could include a medical examination consisting of random drug or alcohol screening. Employees must not engage in gambling, practical jokes, scuffling, horseplay, fighting, harassment, or urge anyone to take unnecessary chances. Only sworn law enforcement officers on official business may carry firearms onto a worksite. Smoking is allowed only in designated smoking areas. No photography or video of any powerhouse, switchyard, or dam is permitted without PG&E approval from the assigned PG&E work supervisor, PG&E escort, or the area manager. To limit distractions and possible injury while performing work activities, including operating equipment or machinery, traffic control, fire watch, crane operations, rigging, confined space attendant, a spotter, or even walking around a busy worksite, phone usage, including texting, is prohibited. If necessary, stop your work activities and step aside to a safe place to conduct business over the phone. Incident reporting. Reporting safety incidents that may occur during the course of the day is also part of working safely. If a safety incident occurs in the course of the work you're performing, stop work immediately and report to your supervisor and the PG&E escort and/or PG&E work supervisor. If the accident involves an injury, please follow the site's Emergency Action Plan, EAP, and notify those you were advised to contact during the site orientation. When reporting an incident, remember to give the location, the type of incident or injury, and describe the people and equipment involved. Contractors are responsible for informing their employees as to where they can get professional medical treatment and ambulance service. Contractors are also responsible for transportation of their employees to off-site medical facilities if emergency medical services are not available to respond to the worksite. Should the incident involve property or environmental damage, notifications to the power generation chain of command as well as governmental agencies may be required. Even when everything is done to prevent injuries or accidents, a near miss or close call may still occur. Determining what happened and how the incident may have been prevented is vital to share with all crew members and PG&E site staff to prevent a reoccurrence. That is why we need your valuable input in sharing what you may have seen, what you think, and any suggestions you may have. Your help just may save a life someday. Motor vehicle operations. One of the greatest safety hazards present within PG&E's hydro generation is the area of motor vehicle operation. PG&E has developed certain guidelines to follow when performing company business, and these rules must be followed. All contract personnel who operate motor vehicles to perform assigned company work shall be familiar with and obey all state and county laws and regulations which govern their use. Additionally, PG&E operates resident employee communities, which have specific speed limits that must also be followed as posted. When driving on rural or unpaved roads, be aware of slick surfaces, soft shoulders, and falling or fallen rocks which may be present on the roadway. Drive at slow speed and be particularly alert of oncoming traffic on narrow and limited visibility roads. When traveling off highways to access dams, reservoirs, or water conveyance system work sites to perform work, contractors must follow local agency requirements, have sufficient exhaust-to-ground clearance, and be outfitted with incipient fire suppression tools such as a 5-gallon water backpack, a round point shovel with an overall length of not less than 46 inches, a rake, and a 5-pound ABC fire extinguisher. This equipment should be inspected regularly and maintained in good working condition. When performing company work in winter periods when snow or ice is present, extreme care must be used by all contract personnel operating motor vehicles, as these conditions demand special driving skills and situational awareness. Weather conditions may create a delay in one's travel, so plan your trips wisely and allow for extra driving time. PG&E operates or outsources heavy snow removal equipment. When in operation, this equipment may obstruct speed and flow of traffic. Therefore, be extremely cautious when driving in snowy conditions, as such equipment may be present at any time. At many locations, site parking is limited, can be congested, and requires extra care when maneuvering vehicles in and out of the parking area. Remain attentive when entering or exiting these parking areas for the presence of other employees on foot. Whenever safe to do so, back vehicles into park and utilize a spotter to help guide you into the parking space. Prior to moving a vehicle from a parked position, perform a 360-degree vehicle walk-around to inspect for obstructions or hazards. Prior to exiting the vehicle, the driver must ensure the vehicle is properly parked and secured, a condition in which the transmission is either in gear or selected to park. Parking brake set and ignition is turned off. Based on vehicle weight, chalking of the tires may be required. Vehicles shall be free of leaks and kept in good operating condition. Personnel are only authorized to travel to and from gated work sites while performing company business. Contract personnel shall not access company property by vehicle through locked gates for the purpose of engaging in recreational activity, such as fishing, hunting, or camping. The use of drones at PG&E is limited to contractors that are pre-approved by PG&E's aviation services. Such approval shall be in writing. All other uses of drones is strictly prohibited. Fire safety. It is important that workers observe all applicable laws, rules, and regulations of any fire agency that has jurisdiction over areas in which they're working, and follow all instructions outlined in fire and use permits. All personnel should have basic training in fire prevention and suppression techniques, and should be aware of the location and use of fire suppression equipment on a worksite in the event such equipment is needed to aid in an evacuation. Contract personnel must not perform any operation or action that could result in vegetation or wildland fires, or fire within confines of a powerhouse or switchyard. Common hot work processes, such as welding, brazing, cutting, and grinding, for example, present a risk of personal injury, fire, and property damage. To mitigate this risk, a hot work permit must be prepared in advance for such work activities and approved for implementation by the PG&E Work Supervisor or PG&E Escort. Finally, during certain seasons when the state of California's fire index rating is listed as very high or extreme, additional precautions may apply. For example, no open burning is permitted, and all fires must be extinguished. Welding is only permitted in enclosed buildings or within a 35-foot perimeter or more cleared outside area. Also, no blasting, smoking, or vehicular traffic off cleared roads is permitted, except in the event of a life-threatening medical emergency. Call before you dig. 811 is the number to call from anywhere in the country before digging is to be performed, so any underground utilities can be marked. This is essential in protecting yourself and others from unintentionally hitting underground utility lines and causing injury to people or damage to critical infrastructures. This is a free service, and the call should be made at least 2 to 3 days in advance. The 811 process includes: notify your local call center by calling 811 or making an online request. Wait the required amount of time for affected utility operators to respond to your request. Confirm that all utility operators have responded to your request and marked underground utilities. Respect the marks. Dig carefully around the marks. Working at heights is another hazard that PG&E takes very seriously. Our policy concerning the use of fall protection, ladders, and scaffolding states that any contractor working at heights shall be trained in the proper use of fall protection equipment and shall act in full compliance with OSHA and the company's Safety at Heights program. Additionally, all work from heights of more than 6 feet must include a rescue plan in which a disabled worker can safely be lowered to the ground. Contract employees are required to use approved equipment that is inspected prior to each use. Any scaffolding is required to be of sufficient strength and rigidity to support, at a minimum, 4 times its intended load. Once erected and inspected by trained and certified personnel, it may not be altered without re-inspection and recertification. No exceptions. Only Type 1 and 1A ladders with non-slip bases are permitted for use in power generation hydro facilities at heights above 6 feet, and their use is allowed only when the work is of short duration. The only exception of this rule is when fall protection equipment is also used. Ladders must be placed on solid, dry, and non-slippery ground, tied off, and should not be erected in doorways or other openings. Finally, only non-conductive fiberglass or wooden ladders are allowed when working near electric circuits or conductors. Confined space. There are numerous work locations inside and outside of powerhouses, such as, but not limited to, turbine casings, generator housings, valve pits, and basement sumps, which present particular safety hazards to personnel intending to perform work in them. Specific confined space entry procedures and specialized equipment are required before they can safely be entered or occupied to perform work. Contractors entering confined spaces in hydro facilities shall comply with applicable OSHA regulations and PG&E procedures. The information presented here highlights some of the considerations for working in and around confined spaces, but is not intended to fulfill or replace any necessary training requirements. A confined space, as typically encountered in a hydro powerhouse, is characterized by the following 3 criteria. 1. It is large enough and configured that an employee can bodily enter the space and perform assigned work. 2. Has limited or restricted means for entry and exit, either for work access or for the removal of a disabled employee. And 3. Is not designated for continuous occupancy. A permit-required confined space, PRCS, is a space that has one or more of the following characteristics. 1. Contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. 2. Contains a material that has the potential for engulfing an entrant. 3. Contains inwardly converging walls or a floor that slopes downward and tapers to a smaller cross-section where an entrant could be trapped or asphyxiated. And 4. Contains any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. Contractor must also attend a site walk with PG&E to identify the confined space location and configuration, site access, scope of work, and potential safety hazards at a minimum. If personnel are entering a permit-required confined space, a rescue plan and rescue service provider must be identified during the planning of the work. Contractors' employees and subcontractors must comply with the safety plans developed for the specific site and scope of work identified. Changes in scope, means and methods, personnel, or any other factor must be addressed in a revised safety plan, or work stoppage if necessary. Work shall not continue until the revised plan is accepted by PG&E. Contractor shall immediately notify the PG&E site representative of any hazards encountered or created during the course of operations and entry, or of any safety near misses or injuries. Debrief PG&E at the conclusion of the confined space operation regarding the confined space program followed and any hazards confronted or created in the confined space during entry operations. Safe working distances. Since performing work within powerhouses can place contract employees in the proximity of rotating machinery and other operating equipment, we have developed specific safety practices that must be strictly followed. But nothing can replace you having a keen awareness of your surroundings at all times. This means keeping a minimum safe working distance between yourself and the operating equipment at all times. And when working near operating equipment, you should always allow space in the event that there is an equipment failure or sudden movement when equipment is automated. The scope of any intended work must be identified in a JSA. And the operating equipment in proximity of your work zone which presents an electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, or other type of hazard will also be identified. If your assigned work cannot be completed in a safe manner while equipment is in service, the assigned PG&E escort and/or work supervisor will request a clearance application through the Hydro Switching Center that will make this equipment inoperative and therefore safer to work near. Whenever it is necessary for you to perform work near operating equipment, Temporary visual barriers such as safety cones, engineered barriers, or barrier tape may be placed between the space occupied by the worker and the nearest operating equipment. PG&E will be responsible for placing and removing these barriers. Especially when working near operating equipment, you should remain constantly alert and focused. As always, if you see any unsafe conditions, stop work. Report the situation, and if practical, correct the condition immediately. PG&E has a formal lockout-tagout (LOTO) program that all employees and contractors must follow. In general, every person performing work under a LOTO clearance must 1. Be trained and understand the requirements of the LOTO procedures. 2. Be reported on or signed on to the clearance before performing any work. 3. Place his or her individual LOTO lock on the main lockbox, portable lockbox, or satellite box before performing any work. 4. Remove his or her individual LOTO lock upon completion of their work. Contractors performing work on hydro-owned or operated equipment and systems must be properly trained in the hazards associated with being near electric lines, generators, turbines, waterways, and associated equipment. Training shall provide the following: 1. Purpose and general application of the group LOTO rules and the process hydrogeneration uses. 2. Distinguish and recognize LOTO locks, lockboxes, tags, and their purposes. 3. Understand that attempting to restart or re-energize equipment or systems that are locked out or tagged out is prohibited, and that any violation will result in disciplinary actions. Switchyard work. When performing work in an energized facility or switchyard, it is important to remember you are close to energized equipment. To ensure that the work is performed safely, clearly define the scope of work, the duration, and the date the work is to be completed. If the work requires equipment to be de-energized and cleared, the PG&E escort will request a clearance application through the appropriate hydro switching center having jurisdiction. Watershed operations staff will be directed to perform switching to established clearances, including the application of locks or tags. Once established, the assigned primary clearance holder will report on the clearance. Prior to beginning any work, the PG&E primary clearance holder, or escort, will walk down the clearance points to verify that all sources of energy have been isolated. It is safe to begin work, and protective grounds are applied if necessary. When performing daily work in unattended switchyards, the operations center with jurisdiction must be notified by the primary clearance holder or escort immediately whenever a worker enters the switchyard at the start of work, and again immediately at the end of the work when exiting from the work site. Should any switchyard equipment that is not directly included in the work scope and not covered by clearance remain in service and energize in the confines of the switchyard, a minimum safe working distance must be maintained between exposed conductors and the employee at all times, and shall be referenced both in the JSA and communicated to assigned employees prior to the start of work in the tailboard meeting. When it is necessary to perform work near energized high-voltage lines or conductors, temporary visual barrier tape is required to be placed between the space occupied by the workers and the nearest energized equipment as a visual reminder of the safe working distance. Barricade tapes are only to be moved or removed under the primary clearance holder's specific direction. For unusual electric hazards or work activity which obscures an employee's line of sight and could result in encroachment on the minimum safe working distance, a QEW, Qualified Electrical Observer, shall be used. The role of the observer is to identify, evaluate, and communicate potential observed electrical hazards to an employee performing the work. Never carry material or tools at shoulder height when working around energized switchyard equipment. Carry long tools and material, including ladders, in a horizontal position, and get help with lengthy loads to effectively control their movement. Always take extreme care to prevent any material or tools from accidentally encroaching on minimum working distances or contacting energized conductors or apparatus. Dams, reservoirs, or water conveyance systems. Work on dams, reservoirs, or water conveyance systems such as open canals, ditches, or flumes may involve work in or alongside conveyance systems when these systems are either charged with water and are flowing or are in a dewatered state. Regardless of the condition or state, numerous hazards exist and must be identified in the JSA and tailboard meetings. Here are a few of the steps we've developed that can help prevent injury. Any work or activity which involves bodily entry into water conveyances requires the application of the clearance or lockout-tagout procedure to fully isolate the water conveyance from all sources of water. Only qualified company personnel are permitted to perform switching operations to establish these clearance conditions, including the placement of tags and locks. If leakage level flows are required to facilitate planning of work in the canal or ditch, such as for water blasting, concrete mixing, or sand trap debris dispersal, this can be established at the onset of the clearance, and the water control gates will then be set in the proper position accordingly. When working with the assigned PG&E escort, you must request a clearance application through the appropriate hydro switching center. The local operations staff will be directed to perform the switching that establishes the clearance. Even after being cleared, unlined ditch sections contain irregularities in their profiles and can hide deep pools or voids in the ditch bottom. Be proactive and advise any and all employees to exercise extreme caution at all times in these areas. The threat of engulfment is possible if someone steps off one of these deep sections. When water conveyance systems are interconnected by unpressurized tunnels, these tunnels are not to be entered unless a specific tunnel entry procedure has been developed, access provisions made, air monitoring equipment is on hand, and portal entry attendants are in position. While appearing relatively harmless, these open tunnels can contain both air quality and deep submergence hazards, since the inverts of the section are often lower than the nominal profile elevation of the canal or ditch bottom. When working on elevated flume trestle structures, contract employees who perform such work must be trained on proper fall protection measures and act in full conformance with the company's Safety at Heights program. During flume work where the hazard fall is 6 feet high or greater, it is mandatory that approved fall protection systems be used. This includes both fall arrest and fall restraint systems. All sites where such work is performed at heights must have a rescue plan and a retrieval system which can be deployed to safely lower an injured worker to the ground. When work is complete, all contract personnel, equipment, and materials are to be removed from the water conveyance systems. On many of the company's water conveyance systems, particular and peculiar design features exist. Siphon tubes, energy dissipators, transition chutes, and passive spillway channels can present additional water safety hazards. While many of these features are guarded by handrails, covers, or gratings, extreme caution must be exercised when working around them at all times. It is important that foot patrols are conducted along established trails and flume walkboards, and you should never attempt to cross a canal or ditch on the uphill bankside unless there is an established and well-maintained footpath. During certain times of the year, personnel may also be exposed to snake and tick hazards, so please keep your eyes on the established path, and please don't step over obstructions unless you are sure of your foot placement. Furthermore, insect repellents to ward off ticks and other stinging insects, as well as leggings to protect against potential snake bites, are recommended. Rules have also been established for safety when the job requires the use of boats, barges, or other work on reservoirs. There are hazards present any time there are controlled or uncontrolled flows into or out of the reservoir. or when the water is entering a tunnel or canal intake structure, or when the dam's spillway or spillway gates are being operated. We've determined that the potential dangers of these hazards can be lessened by the following steps. 1. By curtailing or shutting down upstream generation facilities. 2. By disabling or limiting the operation of spillway gates. Or 3. By lowering reservoir levels to an agreed-upon clearance level in order to render spillways inoperative. Additionally, protective floating boom barriers can serve as a way to keep boats a safe distance from intakes or spillways. Any employee wading in water that may be deep, water that may have a swiftly moving current, or employees who might be working near dock edges or walkways where it is possible to fall into the water must always wear a U.S. Coast Guard approved life vest, or must wear approved fall restraint equipment. If suitable handrails or bulkheads are in place, no life vest or fall restraint is required. When using unpowered or powered boats to access work sites or barges as work platforms, assigned employees must wear life vests at all times. Additionally, anytime there is a hazard of drowning, an approved throw ring, bag, and 600-pound test tether line of at least 90 feet in length must be available to aid in the rescue of an employee when they accidentally enter the body of water. It is important that all personal and rescue flotation devices be maintained in good working condition, that they be inspected regularly, and they are removed from service when damage is found which would compromise their buoyancy properties. Motorboats must be inspected prior to use for integrity and functionality, and should be checked for sufficient fuel in order to make the expected trip. Boat operations in inclement weather or after dark present additional hazards, so local watershed operating procedures are to be followed under these specific conditions. It is the operator's responsibility to ensure that all tools and material are properly loaded and secured, and that all passengers are seated and spread evenly. For emergency use, all motorized boats are to be outfitted with an oar set and functional oar locks, if equipped, as well as a gaff hook, for standoff use and for the grasping of lifelines when needed. Only qualified PG&E employees are permitted to operate PG&E-owned boats, both unpowered and motorized. At the completion of the job, all contract personnel, equipment, and materials are to be removed from the work location. Helicopter safety. The use of helicopters to safely deliver materials and personnel to some of the remote or difficult-to-reach areas is a routine task that you need to be aware of while working at some hydro sites. The procedures to follow when working with helicopters are: 1. Stay clear of the rotor blades while they're in motion. 2. Wait until the blades are completely motionless before approaching the helicopter. And 3. Stand clear when the helicopter is preparing to take off. Just like working with cranes, do not stand under a load being lifted by the helicopter, and use the standard lifting hand signals when the load is to be lifted. Be very careful not to let any loads lean on or swing into the helicopter while rigging or preparing loads to be lifted. Be careful of flying debris from the helicopter wash when the helicopter is landing or taking off. Also, use properly fitted goggles to completely protect your eyes from this flying debris, and use restrainer straps to secure hard hats. Housekeeping. We have a policy of maintaining housekeeping here at our facilities. Put simply, that means that everyone is responsible for maintaining a clean, orderly, and safe work area. Specifically, combustible materials should be placed in provided containers rather than accumulating in work areas. Floors, stairways, and platforms should be free of dangerous projections, obstructions, and penetrations, as well as in good repair, and free from water, oil, and grease. When it is necessary that you work on slippery floor surfaces, the use of mats, cleats, or a non-slip sand may be used to lessen the chance of danger. Stairways, aisles, exits, and walkways must be kept clear at all times, or barricade tape must be used to prevent others from traveling through the hazardous work area. Materials, supplies, and tools should be stored and secured in an organized manner. The job is not finished until the cleanup is complete. Leaving a cluttered worksite is asking for problems, as clutter presents a real slip-trip hazard to those working at the site and others who might be passing through. A clean worksite is a safe worksite, and we ask that you clean up your worksite or break area before leaving for the day.
Okay, that covers most of the safety procedures and requirements for you to work at our hydro facility. But be aware there are always circumstances and situations that can't be covered in a video. Should you have any questions or need clarification of anything you may have seen in this program, or if you encounter anything during your tenure at a PG&E worksite that you are unsure of, never hesitate to ask for help. Our #1 priority is safety, and it should be yours as well. As a final note, be sure to put the verification sticker on your hard hat, unless you'd like to watch this program each time you work at one of our hydro facilities. Now please remember to apply what you've learned each and every day, because we're all counting on you to do your part to help make our workplace injury-free.